The very air in the old community hall seemed to hum with a warmth that had nothing to do with the late August sun streaming through the tall, arched windows. It was a warmth woven from the intricate threads of a life well lived, from decades of shared laughter, quiet triumphs, and the unbreakable bonds of family. We were all here for Mom, for Eleanor. Her 85th birthday party was in full swing, a vibrant, noisy testament to her enduring grace and strength. My son, Jack, had been my co-conspirator all morning, his lanky teenage frame perched precariously on a stepladder as we strung fairy lights across the wooden beams. He'd helped me arrange dozens of gardenias, her absolute favorite, in mismatched crystal vases, and their sweet, heady perfume now wrapped around us, a scent I would forever associate with my mother's smile. Eleanor herself was the calm, radiant center of this happy chaos. We'd brought her favorite armchair from home, a plush worn velvet wingback that enveloped her small frame. From this soft throne, she reigned over the festivities. Her silver hair, which she insisted on styling herself, was a crown of soft waves, and the dress she wore, a thoughtful gift from Jack, was the precise shade of a twilight sky, deepening from lavender to a dusky blue. She wasn't merely a passive observer, she was the heart of it all. Her laugh, a sound as familiar and comforting to me as my own heartbeat, would periodically bubble up, a clear, bright note rising above the gentle hum of conversation as a procession of old friends and family members took turns sharing a moment, a memory, a hand squeeze with her. I'm Sarah, her daughter. Standing near the edge of the room, watching her, a wave of such profound gratitude washed over me it was almost dizzying. She had been my entire universe for so long. Raising me on her own after my father's early death, she had seamlessly played the role of both mother and father, the steady hand and the soft shoulder. I had a sudden, vivid memory of her coming home late from her second job cleaning offices, the scent of pine cleaner clinging to her clothes, yet she'd never once been too tired to sit on my bed and read me a story. Her love was a fierce, unconditional, and utterly reliable force. Seeing her here today, bathed in the glow of so much reciprocal affection, felt like the most beautiful kind of justice. Jack, my 16-year-old, was her shadow in the best possible way. He adored his great-grandmother, and the bond they shared was a special kind of magic that transcended the 70-year gap between them. He had just finished telling her a story, leaning in close, his young, earnest face a study in concentration. I could see the way his expression mirrored hers as he reached the punchline, a comical disaster involving a chemistry experiment at school. She was chuckling, a deep, genuine laugh that made her eyes sparkle, her small, wrinkled hand resting on his muscular forearm. In that simple, tender gesture, I saw a bridge spanning 4 generations, a connection forged in a language of pure, uncomplicated love. The room was filled with faces I'd known my whole life, aunts, uncles, cousins, and neighbors who were practically family. But in any large gathering, there are always a few outliers, those on the periphery. Brenda was one of them. She was a distant cousin of my late father's, a woman tethered to us by the thinnest of threads, someone we saw only at the largest of family functions, funerals mostly. She had a perpetually sour expression, as if she'd just bitten into a lemon, and she held herself with a rigid posture that seemed to repel warmth. She was standing by the refreshments table, nursing a glass of punch and surveying the room with an air of detached, critical judgment. I sighed internally. As the host, it was my duty to make her feel welcome, an act that always felt like a monumental effort. I was making my way towards her, composing a pleasant, neutral opening line in my head, when her voice, sharp and unwelcome as shattered glass, cut through the pleasant noise. She was speaking to another distant relative, but she pitched her words to Carrie, a subtle act of aggression. "Honestly, I don't know why we go through all this trouble," she said, gesturing vaguely with her glass in my mother's direction. "It's all a bit much, isn't it? At this age, they don't even really know what's going on. Old people shouldn't be at parties. They should be at home, resting. It's just a performance." The words struck me with physical force, knocking the air from my lungs. It wasn't just the breathtaking cruelty of the sentiment, but the casual, arrogant disdain, the utter lack of empathy. My mother, who was at that very moment engaged in an animated, detailed conversation with her oldest friend about a trip they took in the 1960s, was being dismissed as a clueless, decorative relic. My polite hostess smile froze and cracked on my face. The warmth in the room suddenly felt like a lie, replaced by a cold, tight knot of anger in the pit of my stomach. I saw the other woman she was speaking to shift uncomfortably, her eyes darting away, refusing to meet my gaze. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to march over there, to unleash the protective fury that was boiling up inside me, to tell her exactly what I thought of her and her bitter, loveless view of the world. But before I could take a single step, I saw a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. It was Jack. He had been walking back from his great-grandmother's chair, probably to get her a slice of the cake we were about to cut. He had stopped dead in his tracks. He had overheard. His face, usually so open and cheerful, transformed. The boyish softness vanished, replaced by a mask of such cold, quiet fury it startled me. He hadn't looked at Brenda. He didn't even seem to register her presence. He hadn't looked at me. His eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on the small, portable stage at the front of the room, where a microphone stood on its stand, waiting for the planned toasts and speeches. Then he started walking. His steps weren't rushed or angry. They were measured, deliberate, each one landing with an unnerving sense of purpose. A chaotic storm of dread and pride warred within me. I had no idea what he was about to do, but I knew, with absolute bone-deep certainty, that he was not going to let that ugly comment stand. The gentle hum of the party continued around us, 100 oblivious conversations, but for me, the world had gone utterly silent. All I could hear was the frantic beat of my own heart against my ribs as my son took the stage. A soft but distinct thump-thump echoed through the hall as Jack tapped the top of the microphone. The sound, amplified and unfamiliar, snagged the fabric of conversation. One by one, heads began to turn. The gentle, rolling wave of chatter faltered, then broke, receding into a pool of curious silence as people noticed the tall, slightly awkward teenager standing alone on the stage, blinking in the modest spotlight. He hadn't been on the schedule of speakers. My own breath hitched, and I felt 100 pairs of eyes on him, then on me. My hands, still holding a small napkin, clenched into a tight, damp ball. Hi everyone, Jack began. His voice, still in that liminal space between boy and man, cracked just a little on the first word. He cleared his throat, gripping the microphone stand with both hands as if it were a life raft. My name is Jack. I'm Eleanor's great-grandson. A few warm, encouraging smiles appeared in the audience, ripples of kindness in a suddenly tense lake. My mother was looking at him with an expression of pure, grandmotherly love, tinged with the same confusion I felt. I'm not on the list to give a speech, he continued, his voice gaining a bit more strength, but I wanted to say something, if that's okay. He took a breath and his eyes swept the room, not with anger, but with a calm, deliberate gaze that seemed far older than his 16 years. I saw his eyes pause for just a fraction of a second in Brenda's direction, a flicker of acknowledgement so subtle I might have missed it if I hadn't known what to look for. She, in turn, was watching him with a look of bored irritation, as if he were an annoying commercial break in her afternoon program of quiet judgment. I overheard someone say a moment ago, Jack said, his voice now steady and clear, ringing with a newfound purpose that sent a shiver down my spine. That maybe, at a certain age, people don't really know what's going on. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A quiet murmur rippled through the hall as people did the quick, silent social calculus, trying to understand what was happening. I felt a hot flush of a terrible combination, protective fury and secondhand embarrassment, rise in my cheeks. But Jack's expression remained serene, almost scholarly. I heard that maybe they should be resting at home, and that parties like this are just a performance. The silence in the room was now absolute, heavy and profound. Every eye was on my son. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Brenda's face freeze. The casual cruelty of her private words, now stripped of their context and laid bare for all to hear, seemed to hang in the air, a foul, visible stain. And you know what? I think that's true, Jack continued, and a collective, quiet gasp rustled through the room. My own heart didn't just drop, it plummeted. Where was he going with this? Had I completely misread him? I think my great-grandmother is giving a performance, he said, and he finally let go of the microphone stand, his posture relaxing as he found his rhythm. In fact, she's been performing for 85 years. He leaned a little closer to the mic, his voice becoming intimate, confidential. She's performed the part of a loving wife and a devoted friend. She performed the role of a single mother, working 2 jobs to raise my grandmother. He glanced at me and his eyes softened. And she performed that part so well, with so much love and so much grit, that my grandmother never, ever felt like she was missing a thing. My eyes, which had been wide with shock, now welled with tears. I saw my mother, sitting in her velvet armchair, press her lips together, her gaze fixed on the boy on the stage. Her boy. She's still performing, Jack went on, his voice ringing with a passion that made him seem to grow in stature. Last month, I had a history paper due on life during the Great Depression. The internet gave me facts, flat, two-dimensional facts, but Great-Grandma Eleanor gave me the story. She performed a memory for me, right there in her living room. She remembered the gritty texture of bread made with more potato flour than wheat. She remembered the specific, bone-deep chill that seeps through a threadbare coat in a Michigan winter. She performed the names of the neighbors who shared their rations, and she remembered the name of the boy who gave her first kiss, and the name of the scruffy dog he owned. She doesn't just know what's going on, she knows what's been going on for 85 years. That's not a memory that should be resting at home. That's a library. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I have a library card. The room was wrapped, caught in the spell he was weaving. He had taken Brenda's ugly, dismissive word and polished it until it shone, transforming it into a beautiful, powerful tribute. So, yeah, this is a performance, Jack concluded, his voice swelling to fill the silent hall. He picked up a glass of water from a small table on the stage and held it high. It's the performance of a life, a magnificent, brilliant, and unforgettable one. And we are the lucky audience. Happy birthday, Great-Grandma. I love you. For a single suspended heartbeat, there was silence. It was followed by the single, sharp sound of one person's hands coming together, then another's. Within seconds, the entire room, save for one person, was on its feet. The applause wasn't just applause. It was a roar, a wave of pure validation and love that washed over the stage, over all of us. I was crying freely now, tears of pride and overwhelming love streaming down my face. I risked a glance at Brenda. She remained seated, a cold, solitary island in a sea of celebration. Her face was a mottled, ugly red, and she stared down into her glass of punch as if it held the secrets to the universe, utterly isolated by the warmth and joy she had tried to poison. My gaze went from her to my mother. She, too, had tears glistening on her cheeks, but they were tears of pure joy. She wasn't looking at the applauding crowd. She was looking right at me, and in her eyes I saw it all. The brief sting of the insult, the fierce, soaring pride in her great-grandson, and a deep, abiding love that flowed between the generations, a bond that nothing could break. She gave me the smallest, most subtle of nods, a shared moment of victory. The applause finally subsided, and Jack, his face now flushed with a mixture of adolescent shyness and profound relief, stepped down from the stage. He didn't walk back to his seat. He walked directly through the crowd, which parted for him like the Red Sea, and went straight to Eleanor's chair. He bent down, and she reached up with both hands, pulling him into a fierce hug that said more than any speech ever could. A silent, perfect conversation of love, gratitude, and fierce, familial pride. The hug seemed to last an eternity, a silent, perfect tableau at the heart of the now buzzing room. The energy had shifted entirely. The polite, pleasant hum of a family gathering had been replaced by something more vibrant and authentic. Jack had not only defended his great-grandmother, he had articulated the very essence of why they were all there. He had given voice to the love in the room, and in doing so had amplified it. When Eleanor finally released him, she kept her hands on his cheeks, her thumbs gently stroking his skin. She looked up at him, her eyes, though clouded with age, shining with a clarity and love that was breathtaking. "My boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion but strong. "My beautiful boy. You get that from your grandfather, you know. He always knew how to stand up. He always knew the right words." Jack, who had faced down a room full of adults with unwavering courage, blushed a deep crimson at her praise. "I just told the truth, Great-Grandma," he mumbled, shuffling his feet. I finally reached them, my own tears now dried, leaving behind a feeling of profound peace. I placed my hand on Jack's back. "That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen," I said, my voice catching. I looked from my son to my mother. "Both of you." Eleanor's gaze met mine over Jack's shoulder, and the nod she had given me from across the room was repeated, no longer subtle, but a clear, powerful acknowledgement of our shared pride, our shared love. The party regrouped around this new, powerful center. The planned toasts that followed felt deeper, the anecdotes more heartfelt. Speaker after speaker, old friends, cousins, my aunt, seemed to take their cue from Jack. They didn't just wish Eleanor a happy birthday. They shared specific, vibrant memories, painting a collective portrait of her life, each story another brushstroke. They spoke of her kindness to a neighbor in the 50s, her steady nerve during a family crisis in the 70s, her wicked sense of humor on a road trip in the 90s. It was no longer a party. It was a living history, a celebration of the library Jack had so beautifully described. I glanced over at the refreshment table. Brenda was gone. There had been no dramatic exit, no final, sour glance. She had simply vanished. My cousin Carol, who had been standing nearby, caught my eye and gave a slight shake of her head. "Slipped out the side door about 5 minutes ago," she mouthed, an expression of grim satisfaction on her face. I felt a flicker of something. Not pity, but a sad kind of finality. Brenda hadn't been cast out. She had simply made herself irrelevant. The world she inhabited, full of bitterness and judgment, had no place in this room. Later, it was time for the cake, a magnificent, multi-layered confection. As the happy birthday song swelled around us, I stood on one side of Mom's chair and Jack stood on the other. Eleanor held the ceremonial knife, but her hand trembled slightly. Jack placed his hand over hers, steadying it. Together, with my hand resting on both of theirs, the three of us made the first cut. The camera flashes that went off felt like capturing a moment of true legacy. 4 generations, connected by a simple, loving touch. As the party began to wind down and guests started to depart, their goodbyes filled with a renewed warmth, I sat with Mom in the relative quiet. Jack was helping collect stray plates, his youthful energy a welcome, restorative presence. Eleanor was quiet for a long time, her eyes following her great-grandson as he moved through the room. "He saved the day, didn't he?" she said softly, not looking at me. "He did," I replied. "He really did. People don't always see," she mused, her gaze distant, sifting through the layers of her 85 years. "They see the wrinkles, the shaky hands. They forget that you're still in here, that all the other years are in here too, all the other people you've been." She patted her chest with a frail hand. "Today, your son made them see." She turned her head and looked at me, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You did a good job with him, Sarah. You did that." And in that moment, the last vestiges of anger and hurt from Brenda's comment finally melted away, replaced by a deep and abiding joy. My son had not only defended his great-grandmother, he had defended the very idea of a life, of its enduring value and its sacred memories. He had stood on a stage and, with nothing but the truth, had turned an act of casual cruelty into a moment of transcendent love. The performance, as it turned out, was not my mother's. It was ours. It was the performance of being a family. And it was, I knew, the greatest show on earth. The last of the guests had drifted away, their parting words still warming the air long after their cars had pulled out of the gravel lot. The community hall, now stripped of its festive clamor, felt cavernous and quiet. The scent of gardenias and vanilla cake still hung sweetly in the air, a fragrant ghost of the celebration. Jack, with a quiet efficiency that belied his years, helped me pack the leftover cake into boxes and gather the scattered vases. There was an easy rhythm to our work, a silent understanding that passed between us. The day had taken its emotional toll on all of us, but it was a good kind of exhaustion, the satisfying ache that comes after work worth doing. We drove home through the deepening twilight. The sky streaked with the same lavender and dusky blue as the dress Eleanor wore. She was in the passenger seat, her head resting against the cool glass of the window, her eyes closed. Jack was in the back, silent. The energy of his public defense now subsided into a quiet introspection. For a few miles, the only sound was the soft hum of the engine. "Brenda was always a sour one," Eleanor said suddenly, her eyes still closed. "Even as a little girl. Her mother, my third cousin Mildred, used to say she was born with a pucker in her soul." I glanced at her. "You heard her then?" I wasn't sure. "Oh, I heard her," she said, a faint, wry smile touching her lips. "At my age, you get very good at selective hearing. But some things are too loud to ignore." She turned her head from the window to look at me, her expression soft in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. "I wasn't angry, just a little tired." "Well, I was angry," I admitted, my hands tightening on the steering wheel at the memory. "Furious, actually." From the back seat, Jack's voice was quiet but firm. It was a stupid thing to say. Eleanor's gaze shifted to the rearview mirror, finding her great-grandson. "It was," she agreed. "But then you said a brilliant thing. And a brilliant thing will always chase a stupid one out of the room." She paused, her eyes holding his in the mirror. "Your speech. That was better than any present, Jack. You gave me my own story back." Jack ducked his head, but I could see his reflection smiling. We pulled into the driveway of her small, neat house. The porch light was on, illuminating the pots of geraniums she tended with such care. Jack and I walked on either side of her up the path, our arms linked through hers, a small, triumphant procession. Inside, the house was filled with the familiar comforts of her life: the scent of lavender potpourri, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the neat stacks of books on every surface. As I helped her out of her coat, she patted my hand. "You go on home, Sarah. Get some rest. You've done more than enough. Are you sure you'll be all right?" "I have never been more all right in my life," she said, and her voice held a note of pure, unadulterated happiness. Jack leaned down and kissed her cheek. "Night, great-grandma. Happy birthday again." "Good night, my love," she whispered, holding his hand for a moment longer. "Don't you ever forget the name of that dog." Jack grinned. "Scrappy. I won't." Driving home with just Jack, the silence in the car felt different. It was comfortable, companionable. "You know," I said, breaking the quiet as we waited at a red light, "I was on my way over to give Brenda a piece of my mind. You beat me to it." He shrugged, looking out the window. I looked at great-grandma, and I thought about all the things she knows, all the stories she's told me, and what that woman said just felt wrong, like tearing a page out of a book you haven't even read. He had understood it on a level that even my protective anger hadn't reached. He hadn't just defended a person. He had defended the principle of her, the vast, priceless archive of her life. When we got home, I stopped in the doorway of his room. He was already at his desk, his laptop open. For a moment, he was just a teenager again, bathed in the bluish glow of the screen. But he was different now. He'd stood on a stage and spoken truth to power, and that kind of courage changes a person, settles them more deeply into their own skin. "Your grandfather would have been so proud of you today, Jack," I told him. He looked up, and his smile was a perfect mix of the boy he was and the man he was becoming. "Thanks, Mom." I went to bed that night and fell asleep instantly, but my dreams were filled with the sound of applause, the scent of gardenias, and the image of my son's face, illuminated and fearless, as he stood up to tell the story of a life. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that the story was in very good hands. A life is not lived in a single day, but in the thousands of moments that weave together to create a unique and irreplaceable story. Every wrinkle holds a memory of laughter, every scar a lesson in resilience, and every quiet gaze a universe of experiences. The greatest gift we can give to those who came before us is to listen, to learn, and to honor their library of years. The performance of their life deserves a standing ovation. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message of hope, and perhaps take a moment today to ask an elder in your life for their story. You might be amazed by the brilliant performance you discover.